morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. I'm your host, Wendy Nystrom, and today's special guest is Scott Barbrett. He is a technical consultant with IND60. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you very much, Wendy. So yeah, the IND60 is actually short for Industry 6.0. We're, essentially cataloging all the best available future-proof technologies and trying to only present solutions that are going to be gravitating beyond the industry transition, the different stages of industrialization since we started to figure out how to, use different, I guess you could say, hydrocarbon sources to create a lot of activity and effort, but how much progress we've really made as a species is debatable. But yeah, we're certainly, causing immense harm to the world. And now trying to reverse some of this stuff when some of the industry is just getting into 4.0, a couple are evolving into 5.0 with AI maybe coming in and replacing all the jobs. 6.0 is really signifying, we're trying to look beyond this point where all the technology that has benefited us is now, freeing up a lot of time. You got I don't need to get into a whole philosophical discussion, but yeah, we got big problems. We're trying to, wean ourselves off of all this requirement for sourcing our electricity and power generation from, burning the black stuff that, has gotten us thus far. But we realize, or at least some are realizing and acknowledging that, we are going to have to make a transition unlike one we've probably seen in a period of time shorter than ever thought possible. So,
just to kind of summarize, one of my professors way back when I would talk about everything going on, and he would say, the only constant in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to adapt. We have to constantly look at how to do things better. If we just do something the same way forever, we'd still be riding horses and buggies. We would not have cars. We would not have automobiles, trains. So we do have to evolve. We do have to adapt. Yes, of course, there's going to be pushback. People don't always like change. Before I dive into how you work on energy efficiency and retrofitting, because that's extremely important, especially with the current state of our infrastructure, what got you into this field? What was your aha moment? Like, I need to do this.
Well, yeah, actually, I've been an entrepreneur now for a little over 12 years. I learned some hard lessons earlier in my career trying to invent and design new gadgets and go get them made in China. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of protections for intellectual property. So I actually had to go through a bankruptcy about 7 years ago. And around that time, I wasn't ready to quit. And I saw everyone going crazy with cryptocurrency mining. And then the cannabis, legalization movement that started in, Canada on a nationwide, but looking at, California's trend and then moving in, there was a ton of people burning crazy amounts of electricity, trying to build artificial light for these, plants and cultivation environments, and then burning all the unnecessary electricity for these, quasi-functional tradable commodity currencies. So back in that time, I was looking at the synergies between these two extremely volatile markets and was going, most of the cost for cooling computers is associated with, the ambient environment and trying to keep a computer room cold. And I saw, the trend that was likely coming with all these now AI data centers basically gobbling up all the new power that we're bringing online that should be going to electric cars and anything else. And I'm like, So, at that time, I started to look more holistically at integrated systems and looking at how wasteful our actual grid is. It's not very well known, but overall, our infrastructure network is about 70% inefficient. That's just mind-boggling to me, because what other kind of industry could get away with that level of, losses? And it's in the form of mostly heat. If you're driving an automobile burning gasoline or diesel, you got at best maybe a 40% efficient engine that's converting, explosions into mechanical power onto the wheels and onward. But all the rest of these externalized, fine particulate emissions and the heat associated with the radiator, and then all that extra heat that it brings to an environment, which you can appreciate, in Los Angeles with this heat wave, all those extra cars adding more, ambient heat to the general area, definitely not helping the equation. So
no, and it has been excessively hot this week. We're looking forward to the break coming hopefully Wednesday. So the big thing, I mean, I don't think most people realize, with the onset of AI, well, let's even go back to cryptocurrency. Mining crypto uses a ton of energy. It is an energy suck. When they build these warehouses that just mine more and more crypto from online, that's a huge amount of energy. Now we've added artificial intelligence, which had to be explained to me because I'm like, well, it's just like, Google search, right? And like, no, it's like 10,000 times the amount of energy because it's pulling so much data, analyzing it quickly, condensing it, and writing it that you're like, wow, I now feel guilty if I use any kind of AI format. So the answer, as you said, is improving that efficiencies within our own structure. And you do retrofit. So could you explain how do you make that happen? Because it can't be easy.
Well, and here's some of the other problems. I recognize that a lot of people want to conserve their nice six-figure jobs. So many of these data center administrators, systems administrators, have chosen to use water evaporative cooling. They're just, not to mention, only sucking out all the, new electricity from the grid, but a lot of them are just taking water, basically heating it up, because water is very efficient at transferring and eliminating and rejecting heat. So many of these water deprived regions like the Western United States are, having another added problem on top of this. So I had discovered another technology out of Hong Kong that got bought by a random Russian, crypto mining company that uses immersion cooling, where they actually treat the chips with a hydrophobic coating and then immerse it in a specialized 3M low evaporation temperature thing that recondenses. And they have by far the lowest, energy consumption associated with data center cooling. And it's been rejected by the industry because, it's nice to have complicated wear parts, humming fans, ruining, ambient noise. And it's just something they're comfortable with, fixing the wires, running the fan. But if you can reduce your data center, operational costs, at least for maintenance and upkeep, to near zero, not to mention not all this waste of water, and you're dropping the power consumption, in some cases by almost half of what the industry is accepting as best standards for really, antiquated techniques. I'm just like, well, who's in charge of making these decisions? And it's impeding even their ability to start getting new installs or permitting as they try to find sites that even have adequate power that they can tap into. So it's a big challenge. But yeah, if we were going to say, for instance, looking at data centers, normally they are using air handling units and bringing in a bunch of outside air, rejecting all the, hot air, and then rejecting it into a cooling tower that they're pumping water through, evaporating or injecting, which can cause algae blooms and aquifers, can cause all kinds of havoc. And really more attention needs to be brought to it, and probably more regulations need to be brought down on the whole industry. But, that those companies involved obviously have trillions of dollars of market capital, so they have pretty powerful lobbying, divisions.
And lawyers.
So, trying to get them to see sense and do and implement some of these things on their own volition. At least some of the industry is starting to move in the right direction with liquid cooling in vertical racks, where they essentially are able to pipe water direct to the chip and then pull it out instead of moving all this unnecessary air. And NVIDIA even invested in their own, partnership with a company to kind of provide these towers turnkey, because a lot of the, let's say, build out of the internet really was not considering, oh, we got, just like the waste heat in the case of our very inefficient grid, only just a couple of years ago, Amazon up in, Seattle, where it gets reasonably cold, only like decided, oh, we got all this heat, why don't we heat all these buildings in downtown Seattle? I'm like, you guys are supposed to be the smartest companies in the world. What is this about? So this gives you a little perspective about, the state of I guess
they didn't have their
logic and decision making, or lack thereof, in some of these choices. And then, I was about 7 years ago watching all these, Tesla drivers basically going from the San Francisco Bay Area down to Los Angeles and vice versa. And at that time, we didn't really have very many superchargers or the charging network. So a lot of them ended up getting stranded around Bakersfield, where, they didn't have enough juice to go there and back. And, looking at how they were basically using diesel to provide the juice that goes into the cars, I'm like, all right, well, now we want to have electric trucks, hydrogen trucks at the port of LA. There's 20,000, 30,000 some drayage trucks. And we only just started putting in the heavy Class 8 truck chargers. And, those are about as much power as a city. If you're going to charge, 100 EV trucks with a battery brick, maybe a couple megawatt hours, it's not an insignificant amount of power. And it's like, where is it going to come from? Because now in the middle of this heat wave, everyone's cranked up the AC trying to stay comfortable. So there's just, some big fundamental issues that need addressing, as soon as humanly possible. And for me, trying to localize and take matters into your own hands and fate, while we're, slowly making progress trying to install more grid scale solar and wind and get it actually connected to the high tension power lines, to get it connected to the rest of the distribution. It's going to be a steep learning curve. And
without a doubt. When you talked about, you clearly work with the EV structure microgrids, but you help people figure out the IRA spending, the Inflation Reduction Act spending, and how that works. And I've heard some good stories and I've heard some bad stories about the efficiency of that particular program. A lot of money was basically earmarked for infrastructure. I don't know if it's actually happening, though. I don't know if it's being implemented, to what extent. How are you helping? Because I know you work with quite a few companies to figure out if they're eligible, if they can use some of that funding to help them get up and running. But primarily with the microgrids, which is what, everything you talked about, that's what we need. We need to put in more renewable energy resources, but also build out the infrastructure so they are resilient. In case one grid goes down, you're not shutting down an entire county.
Yeah. And, the challenges with implementing sort of specialized solar are, aspect that's going to be evolving as time progresses. Some of the, larger facilities that would have the, free real estate, so to speak, on their roofs, a lot of them don't have the weight loading that can actually accept the regular poly and monocrystalline solar panels. So there are some companies working on some of the lighter weight, low load solar without having to do reinforcements. Obviously, if you're building on solar carports and different parking spaces, there's a double benefit of not having a crazy hot car to, end up out after you get off of work and so on. But basically, there's only so much urban real estate that can be tapped, and it obviously costs more than building in some dust field out in the nowhereville of the desert in the case of California. But basically, I recognized somewhat recently that the low-hanging fruit is actually the air conditioning system, which in most cases can be from 40 to 80% of a facility's power consumption. So, you know, some of these systems basically, if you're bringing in less air that you actually have to treat and, you know, condition, you're going to dramatically reduce your overall associated power. So there's been a few advances in nanotechnology and different sorbents and other, let's say, energy recovery devices and heat exchangers that are almost passive systems that can just be plunked onto your existing air handling and HVAC units. And as long as you're able to demonstrate a reduction of 50% of the associated power consumption, in many cases, facilities are qualified for up to $5 a square foot, and that's gratis, you know. So in the case of some of the solar and the other stuff, Uncle Sam is going to pick up maybe 30% of the cost in the form of a tax credit, installing, you know, maybe prime power that could be funneled to your HVAC. But this little niche basically is totally absent, unrelated to installing new batteries, new solar, new power generation. It's basically the low-hanging fruit. And we're primarily going to be targeting commercial and industrial customers because we don't have the bandwidth to be dealing with household. But yeah, I believe it's rewiringamerica.org. Let me just check real quick here. Yeah, rewiringamerica.org. They have some basic information about the tax credits available to homeowners, and heat pumps are the big you know, push. But then again, we need more power that's going to help drive the, you know, efficiency of this. And not everyone's familiar with heat pumps, but basically you can put in more, you can put in a little electricity and you get essentially a thermal kilowatt hour excess of production. So many of these heat pumps are about a COP, which is coefficient of performance, 4 to 5, which is considered pretty good. For instance, in New York, which I know you lived for a while, 2 companies made window kind of horseshoe-shaped heat pumps because many you know, landlords don't want modifications to exteriors that might create leaks and other, you know, issues. So many homeowners can't take advantage of, you know, these, I guess, resources for the implementation of these technologies. And if you're going to put rooftop solar on multi-dwelling units, how do you fairly divvy it up to each of the different units? So I've seen some pretty smart solutions where they're doing what you could call behind the meter. So this is stuff that doesn't need to connect to the grid. And that's where, you know, unfortunately in California, PG&E, you know, had the bankruptcy because they neglected line maintenance that led to wildfires that they were deemed responsible for and had to pay out big bucks. So they ended up, you know, having a shortfall of technicians, a massive backlog of even doing grid connects and ties. When we were doing, you know, all the green rush of the cannabis industry, many of these facilities couldn't get connected to the grid. So they just ended up burning a bunch of diesel to power their cultivation operations. So, you know, getting local and urbanized microgrids is incredibly important, but trying to pick the best available technologies where you get the most efficient, I guess, conversion of electricity, or just reduce the need for it by reducing the amount of air you have to, you know, actually treat and condition is really where I think
it's the most important. I mean, with all of the heat waves we're having worldwide, getting air conditioning and cooling people's homes has become extremely important. I mean, the Midwest and the Northeast had an unusually warm summer. And I grew up in the Midwest as well. And, you know, summer was warm, but not crazy. You know, it was hot, but not bananas. This past couple of years, it's been abnormally hot. People do not have their homes outfitted for that because it's abnormal. Why would they? Some of these are historical homes. So that is kind of, as you said, low-hanging fruit. I think it's probably one of the most important things we need to focus on because people's health is at risk now. And if they can't find a place to cool down, we'll have a problem.
Sure. And, they just had a heat index of 180 degrees Fahrenheit world record in Iran. So, some of these other parts of the developing world that are going to start to become uninhabitable due to heat stress and these, what do they call it? Anyways, they have these wet bombs where you literally will die. Like in India, happens all the time, where the humidity and the temperature
Oh,
gets
yeah.
to a point where survivability is like 30 minutes if you're out and exposed and not into a climate condition, area. So,
Oh, I
and
didn't know
there's
about that.
billions of people that live in India, and probably hundreds of million in these more specific zones, say North Pakistan, parts of India. And, as their economic prosperity increases, they're going to be making more investments in, I guess, climate adjusting devices or air conditioners, which is going to put more strain on their grid. So they're going to have other, you know, issues to contend with. And 8% of global power consumption is affiliated with climate conditioning indoor built environments, and that's responsible for about 4% of global CO2 emissions. So it is not an insignificant
No.
amount of impact. Just trying to basically keep our habitats comfortable. And since the air conditioner was
Survivable.
invented back in 1902 by the Carrier Corporation, everyone started to move to places we probably had no business moving to in the first place. And yeah, you look at all the retirees in U.S. heading to Phoenix, they want to play golf, down to Florida, crank the air
Yeah.
conditioning to 11. We're going to have some really big issues, especially as more and more of the baby boomer generation decides to retire for fair weather, because your bones get creaky in the cold winters. So,
Oh, absolutely. And I personally know one person who cranks up her air to be as chilly as possible, but then opens up all of her windows because she cannot stand having her windows closed. And I'm like,
yeah,
that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then she said, well, it never gets cold enough. I'm like, close your windows.
yep. Well, every time I go visit my parents in Florida, you got to bring a jacket in the, grocery stores, because they just crank it to insanely cold,
Yeah.
uncomfortable temperatures. But I guess if you actually live there, that's maybe one of the few chances you have to cool
Cool
off.
down.
So they're trying to,
But
balance.
so bringing it back to you and your work, this is
Mhm.
where you help corporations, company, not the homeowners. You gave us the link for that one, but the corporations to actually be more efficient and actually not use as much energy, or if they do use it, to not use something they're burning like petroleum, and to use renewable energy. How do people, the services you offer, you help people find out if they're eligible or if they can't even get access to this. And then what's the next, how do you walk them through all of this?
Yeah, ideally, we're trying to package everything up with a nice bow, because many business owners are busy and don't have time to do all the research. But, they also may not also have the financial working capital to make the investment. So we're working on trying to identify different finance, I guess, partners that can help with bridge loans, because clearly the value and the payback periods can be calculated very easily based on how many kilowatt hours you might be burning, or megawatt hours per month, per year. And yeah, I was seeing, I think there's $26 a megawatt hour of power generation for tax credits. So if you're throwing rooftop or car, let's say parking lot type solar, or even in some parts of the country you might be able to do small scale wind power generation. If you're cranking out power that you're using, you're going to get kind of double dip opportunities, not just of reducing your power bill, but also maybe getting a kickback for actually being a micro grid. Now, if you have to connect it to the grid, it gets a little more tricky. And one thing my other friend and hopefully soon business partner identified was they have what they call electrical switch gears that are needed to actually connect for these power increases, to get kind of grid upgrades as a business grows, you might want to, throw some more manufacturing equipment. But if there's no available power to spare, how are you going to do that, especially if you have to wait in the queue for one of these utilities to come connect to you? So he's planning to start manufacturing some of these devices because he recognized the shortfall of different, very well-established players like Schneider Electric. So he has to get, the UL certification so that it's, deemed, I guess a insurable item, because if you had an electrical fire, those are some of the challenges to contend with. But if we're helping overall businesses reduce the associated power with climate conditioning their indoor environments, now that frees up extra capacity that could help with business expansion. Because especially in California, we've got a reputation of being not friendly for business. So many have, pulled up roots and headed elsewhere, Idaho, Texas, etc. So trying to keep, the ability to grow here while we still have a semi-dysfunctional power generating grid and growing pains. We lost, or at least there was a decent amount of exodus of Californians during COVID and the pandemic and business closures. So there's maybe, more capacity, but it's a great place to live. And I know, if we can create the right jobs and employment opportunities, we'll be able to attract a lot more, people seeking the California dream like myself. So I've been, before ending up in Ecuador, long story, for 3 years, I was California, resident for at least 13. And I would love to continue to, live in California, but definitely it's gotten much more expensive. So,
But I mean, most things have, and that's a whole other topic. But getting back to, what you do to help people out, primarily in California, is where you offer your services, helping them figure out, this is a roadmap, and it's a complicated roadmap, and most people don't even understand where to start, which is usually the hardest part. Like once you kind of get into it, you can kind of follow your feet. You actually help them at the beginning and you map it out for them. As you said, not everybody is going to have the financial resources to hire somebody in-house to do this for them, to actually dedicate themselves. So you are an outsource for that. What would be the best way for someone to find you if they wanted to have a continuing conversation?
Yeah, we're still in the process of building the website. Hopefully we'll be able to launch by the end of the year. So yeah, my email will be scott@ind60.com. So yeah, I've been negotiating a lot of the relationships with some of the manufacturers of these technologies to basically, I guess, perform the function of a manufacturer's representative initially. And long-term, we plan to be doing full system builds and integrations. Some of these technologies are actually international based, and it makes little sense to be importing, some of these to be installed in the domestic U.S. So if we begin to start to build the pipeline of acceptance and adoption within, the HVAC, industry, as well as microgrid installers, our long-term intention is to negotiate with some of these technology providers to build these, devices and finished systems and retrofit, objects in the United States. Maybe in California, kind of depends, finding qualified labor force. Many people are moving towards automation for, more consistent production. But yeah, it'd be great to employ Californians. And we're going to need a lot of installers because some of this stuff is a little unconventional. So there is a learning curve. So building the sort of new academies or training, regimens to get them qualified to do proper installations, that's going to reflect poorly if we don't do a good job and, hold up our, claim, performance scenarios.
I do know that the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers are actively training in EV and solar and renewable energy, so they can actually have those transferable skills. So I had a friend who was working there for years, and that was her job, making sure that these, that those processes were in place. So as more EV was being installed, more solar was installed, more renewables, that these guys could just jump right in and take over. So fortunately, that is somewhat happening. We still have a lot to do, as you said. There's many small pieces to pull together.
Well, yeah, in ancient Iran, they kind of designed the original, I guess, passive houses where they had big air intakes, and they would move all the air around and naturally flow through facilities. We just decided to start brute forcing once we figured out we can, use this compressed refrigerant fluid and blow a bunch of, air on it. And we need to start getting more logical about how we approach the climatization of indoor, environments. So the principles that we're, focusing on are mostly passive in nature, because some companies like to make a bunch of money on after sales support and routine maintenance. I would rather just set it, forget it. It's going to last 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, not everyone can make that long of a decision cycle necessarily, but if people are planning to be around a while, the money is only available till 2031, so everyone's got to get while the getting is good. We're only 2 years in, just about this Inflation Reduction Act, and there's hundreds of billions of dollars of free money from the government available. It's really
to get it done.
Sensible for everyone to realize what's available and then start making a plan. There's time to get it implemented, but once the money's gone, it's gone. So
once the time frame's over. So guys, you need to call Scott. Go find him on LinkedIn, network and connect, because this is important information to have. And clearly, Scott, you've worked with many companies, so you already know, you kind of have the formula down. So you do know what to do. You do know how to get it done. And on that, I really thank you for your time today. This has been an extremely educational interview, even for me. I've learned a lot of information that I previously did not know about. So I am grateful for that. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I've had quite some time to really try to take stock of the whole situation and figure out how to make the little impacts. I obviously have a lot of other ambitions I'd like to realize, especially with all the wildfires in California. I mean, that's an obvious answer to get more community microgrids, and probably the biggest jobs program since the original New Deal. And just last week here in Ecuador, they had crazy amounts of wildfires, totally deteriorating the air quality. And I was never expecting to see that here, because they normally get unbelievable amounts of rain, but because of maybe, the new normal as a result of climate change, or it could be La Nina, El Nino weather cycles. But either way, these are some unconventional, unprecedented times we live in. So those kind of campaigns require a lot more political, finagling, because the federal government owns a good portion of the national parks and forest land in say the Western US. So you have to get, not just California government, but also, federal government to try to support some of these things. But it's needed, if we're going to even try to look at what they did in Norway, Nordic and Scandinavian countries after Chernobyl. They switched after, this nuclear incident to biomass energy. And it seems pretty foolish that we wouldn't follow suit in the US, at least as we try to transition to a post-hydrocarbon economy. But
oh, absolutely. We definitely do need to do that. So guys, please check out Scott Barbaret. Please look up IND60. Find them online. Reach out to Scott and just ask questions. There's no stupid question. Trust me, I've probably asked them all. So reach out to Scott, see what he can do for you, and let's just do things better. That's all I ask. And Scott, thank you for your time again. Awesome job. Great information. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. I'm Wendy Nystrom, your host with Environmental Social Justice. We are now proudly sponsored by BioLargo. They just make life better. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.